Hello! Thank you for tuning into Storytime with Uncle Scotty. As you may or may not know, I am your host, Uncle Scotty. Now, you may notice something a little bit different about this scene right now, and it is this box. As it has been famously said, what's in the box? What's in the box? Shall we see? What's in the box? Look at that. Let's raise this up. Let's see. It looks to be a mug. It is a mug. It's the official Storytime with Uncle Scotty mug. As I've said before, as I've said 32 times before, we have our own mugs. And now we literally have our own mugs. Could I be any happier than I am now? Probably not. As my favorite Kristen Wiig character on SNL might say, oh my God! Oh my gosh! Now, I have a fresh mug here, washed, because not only am I washing mugs, I'm also washing my hands. I'm also hydrating. We have our own mugs. Now, fun aside, let's get to some fun. You may recall that we have been reading Sideways Stories from Wayside School by Lewis Shar. And we've just been powering through this class. 30 stories from the 30th story. We've read about a couple of teachers, a bunch of students, and one dead rat. Now, it's time to meet our next characters from our next stories. Look at that light. Don't forget, if you're interested in your own mug, you can join us on Patreon. We have mugs, bookmarks, and stories that can come to you live or any way that you would want. Let's move on. Chapter 22, The Three Eriks. In Mrs. Jewls' class, there were 3 children named Erik. Erik Frye, Erik Bacon, and Erik Ovens. They were known throughout the school for being fat. What? They were known throughout the school for being fat. Not my words. Erik Frye sat at the end of the room, Erik Bacon sat at the middle of the room, and Erik Ovens sat at the end of the room. Wait, let me rewind that back. Erik Frye sat at this end of the room, Erik Bacon sat at the middle of the room, and Erik Ovens sat at that end of the room. Frye, Bacon, Ovens. Ovens, Bacon, Frye. Frye, Bacon, Ovens. Ovens, Bacon, Frye. There was a joke around Wayside School that if all 3 Eriks were ever at the same end of the room at the same time, the whole school would tip over. It's not very nice. Erik Bacon hated jokes like that. That's not surprising. After all, he wasn't even fat. In fact, he was the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewls' class. But nobody seemed to notice. The other 2 Eriks were fat, and so everyone thought that all 3 Eriks were fat. But I'm not fat, Erik Bacon insisted. What's your name? Asked Jason. Erik, said Erik Bacon. Then you're fat, Jason concluded. Remember, Jason had a big mouth. And pretty soon, skinny little Erik Bacon, the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jewls' class, had the nickname Fatso. Erik Frye was really fat. He was also the best athlete in Mrs. Jewls' class. His body was solid muscle. However, nobody ever noticed. The other 2 Eriks weren't very good at sports. Erik Ovens was clumsy. Erik Fatso Bacon was a good athlete for his size, but because he was so skinny, he didn't have much power. I might know a little something about that, minus the skinny part, just the lack of power. So naturally, everybody was just assuming that Erik Frye was also clumsy and weak. After all, his name was Erik. Whenever the other kids chose teams, Erik Frye was the last one picked. They never noticed his home runs or the fabulous catches he made. Like all great athletes, he made the impossible look easy. Of course, the other kids did notice the one time he dropped the ball. Erik Frye was playing right field. Terrence belted a deep fly to left. Erik Frye raced all the way across the field after the ball, and at the last second dived after it. He caught it mid-air on his fingertips. But as he hit the ground, the ball squirted loose. "Well, what do you expect from Butterfingers?" said Stephen. And since that time, Eric Frye has had the nickname Butterfingers. And here you can see Eric Frye doing some acrobatic diving across the field. And people are like, "Butterfingers." Also, shout out to him for trying to catch a baseball with his bare hands in the outfield. Eric Ovens was the nicest person in Mrs. Jewls' class. He treated everyone equally and always had a kind word to say. But because his name was Eric, everyone thought he was mean. Now before we see that, here's young Eric Bacon eating an apple, so skinny. Check out that knit turtleneck he's wearing and those great sneaks. Calling him Fatso, not very nice. Fatso was mean because everyone called him Fatso. Butterfingers was mean because he always had to play right field. So naturally, everyone just assumed that Eric Ovens was also mean. They called him Crabapple. Here you can see Eric Ovens, Crabapple. What's he got in his hand? Let's find out. Sweet contrast stitching on your jeans, Eric Ovens. "Good morning, Allison," said Eric Ovens. "How are you?" "Lay off, Crabapple, will ya?" answered Allison. "If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all." All three of the Eriks had nicknames. It was better that way. Otherwise, when someone said, "Hey, Eric," no one knew who they were talking to. One time, all the Eriks would answer, and the next time, none of them would answer. But when someone said, "Hey, Crabapple," then Eric Ovens knew they were talking to him. And if someone said, "Hey, Butterfingers," Eric Frye knew that they meant him. And when someone said, "Hey, Fatso," Eric Bacon knew that he was being called. It's a tough life for the Eriks up in Miss Jewls' class on the 30th floor. Let's learn about our next character. Chapter 23, Allison. Allison had pretty blonde hair and always wore a sky blue windbreaker. Her windbreaker was the same color as her eyes. She was best friends with Rondi. Rondi had blonde hair too, but she was missing her 2 front teeth. Allison had all of her teeth. Classic Allison. Allison used to say that she knocked Rondi's teeth out. Allison was very pretty, so all the boys in Mrs. Jewls' class teased her, especially Jason. But Allison said, "Leave me alone or I'll knock your teeth out, just like I did Rondi's." The boys didn't bother her after that. One day, Allison brought a tangerine for lunch. Tangerine. She took off the peel in one piece. Miss Mush, the lunch teacher, walked up to her. "Allison, may I have your tangerine?" she asked. Miss Mush always gave food to the children, so Allison was happy to give her tangerine to Miss Mush. Miss Mush shoved it in her mouth and swallowed it in less than 4 seconds. Done. Allison left the lunchroom and walked to the library. The lunchroom was on the 15th story. So, Miss Jewls' class, 30th story. Lunchroom, 15th story. Library was on the 7th. Allison already had her book. She just went to the library because it was nice and quiet in there. The librarian walked up to Allison. "What are you reading?" she asked. Allison told her the name of the book. "That sounds like a good book," the librarian said. "Jay never read that one. May I borrow it?" I wonder if that maybe is a typo and maybe it's supposed to say, "I never read that one." But I'm not sure. Let's keep moving on because these stories are sideways. So the librarian says, "Jay never read that one. May I borrow it?" The librarian always lent books to children. Allison was glad to be able to return the favor. She lent the librarian the book, then walked down the stairs outside to the playground. All of Allison's friends were playing freeze tag. Allison didn't feel like playing. She reached into the pocket of her sky blue windbreaker, same color as her eyes, and took out a tennis ball. She bounced it a couple of times on the ground. Lewis came up to her. "Hey, Allison," he said. "May I play with your tennis ball?" Lewis always gave balls to the children. Allison happily gave her ball to Lewis. Lewis threw the ball all the way to the other side of the playground. Then he went chasing after it. Allison didn't feel like doing anything. Jason ran up and tagged her. "You're frozen," he said. "Get out of here before I knock your teeth out," said Allison. Jason shrugged his shoulders and left to the left. Allison went right back inside and up the 30 flights of stairs to Mrs. Jewls' room. The lunch period wasn't over yet, but Allison didn't feel like doing anything else. She had given her food to the lunch teacher, her book to the librarian, and her ball to the yard teacher. She went inside the classroom. Mrs. Jewls was there. "Oh, Allison, I'm glad you're here," said Mrs. Jewls. "I'm having trouble with an arithmetic problem. Maybe you can help." "Sure," said Allison. Mrs. Jewls always helped the children with their problems. Allison was happy to help. "How do you spell chair?" asked Mrs. Jewls. She said it was an arithmetic problem. "C-H-A-I-R," said Allison. "Yes, that's right," said Mrs. Jewls. "I knew it wasn't C-H-A-R-E, but I couldn't remember what it was." "That's not an arithmetic problem," said Allison. "That's spelling." "Yes, you're right again," said Mrs. Jewls. "I always get the two mixed up." What a weird teacher. What a weird teacher. The bell rang. The lunch period was over. Allison could hear the other children running up the stairs. "Allison," said Mrs. Jewls, "you learned a very important secret today, and I don't want you to tell any of the other children, not even Rondi." "What was that?" asked Allison. She didn't even know she had learned a secret. She loved secrets. "You learned that children are really smarter than their teachers," said Mrs. Jewls. "Oh, that's no secret," said Allison. "Everybody knows that." Wow, shots fired. Allison, come in with the heat. Wow, okay. And that is what we're going to do today for Storytime with Uncle Scotty. I have been your host, Uncle Scotty. We really actually have our own mugs. And water out of your own mug is so much more delicious than water out of a fake your own mug. Thank you to our sponsor, Time, because without Time, Storytime with Uncle Scotty would just be... Check us out on Patreon if you are interested, and otherwise, we will see you next time on Storytime with Uncle Scotty. Thank you. Bye.